Welcome to a healthy living video blog at workoutmaster.com. This is Ruben.
And this is Aram.
Today we're going to talk about our really dear sweet friend. We call him Sugar.
You call him or you call her?
Well, whatever you're going to call him, her.
Don't matter.
It's a Sugar.
Anyway, don't matter. Why people have so many misconceptions about sugar being the great source that it is of a nutrient and a form of creating energy, and why is it that we have so much confusion on sugar, Aaron?
Well, I think the biggest confusion comes from the fact that there's a lot of diabetes in the country, and people have very serious issue with the blood sugar regulation problem. We learned from years of studying and stuff that sugar potentially can create a trouble. Now, what we want to figure out is which kind of sugar does not create trouble, because it's pretty obvious that you cannot survive without sugar.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like a water. You know, you can live. You cannot live without water.
That's correct.
But you can drown in the water.
That's right.
So it's just a matter of how much of it. It's not that the water is good or bad. Good or bad is like a human concept.
Yes.
It's neither good or bad. It's just there. What we do with this is
how much you need and how you use it, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when it comes to sugar, we would want to talk today about why certain sugars are better for you and they're friendly, and why other sugars are not so good for you.
Absolutely.
And they're enemies.
And they're enemies of the state. Yes. So I think the first difference that we have to create between the sugar is to identify the sugar coming from fruits and white table sugar, or just processed sugar per se,
which is sucrose.
Which is sucrose, of course, and then the sugar that you can obtain by metabolizing and eating legumes and grains.
Basically starch.
Cereal, which are starch, of course. So there's two major differences between those two sugars.
So starch gets converted into glucose.
That's correct.
Which have a high ability. No, not ability, it will jack up your blood sugar levels high up, and it will drop it down and will create a cascading problem, which is a trouble. So if you ever eat it, you want to eat it with a lot of fat and protein. We're going to talk about this.
Absolutely. And adding to that, it has to make sense to people that when we talk about consuming sugar, you never consume sugar by itself. It's always in the company of protein and fat, and that's very important, because if anybody was going to do a study on how the body will react to eating sugar by itself, it's not going to be a good one. But guess what? It wouldn't be a good one either if you ate protein by itself or fat by itself. So let that be clear, because people seem to miss that little difference there.
You're confused about it. Anyway, so besides that, sucrose, which is a white table sugar, which been pretty much, I avoided it for years. I'll be pretty honest. I haven't touched a white sugar in years. Now I'm starting to understand that there's a possibility that it's actually very healing for you.
That's correct.
Yeah? So the biggest part of what we understand right now, or it comes to our attention, that sucrose is basically a combination of a glucose and a fructose, and when you consume it, you actually do not get blood sugar regulation.
Blood sugar, there won't be a major spike in blood sugar levels, because of the fructose does not do that. It actually helps out to maintain blood sugar levels, and in combination with the glucose does not have this detrimental effect. So actually they both balance themselves each other out pretty well.
That comes down to also fructose. Fructose by itself also a good source of sugar, can be easily used by the body. Now this is the thing, sugar is an essential fuel for our body, and that's why we need sugar. Without sugar, we are not going anywhere. So if our body is deficient in sugar, it will use something else, generally your protein or your muscle tissue, to be broken down to convert into sugar so it can use it, which is not very efficient and takes basically a toll on the body. So ultimately you would want to have more sugar in your diet. That's or at correct. Least you don't want to overdo it, obviously, but you don't want to have too little of it either.
Right.
You know, like they go on a diet that is like no sugar diet completely.
Right. Absolutely.
And the biggest misconception, it comes down to the complex carbohydrates. Yeah, they say complex carbohydrates will be broken down into sugars a lot slower, which is not necessarily true.
No, actually, to mention a few examples, for example, grains, they actually, when they break down into glucose, they tend to have a tremendous spike in your blood sugar levels. Obviously, it's going to have a reaction of insulin and the other hormones that go along with it, and creating, a nasty effect on the body. So by no means, complex carbohydrates are necessarily the best source of energy, counting sugar as the
and when you eat greens, also it's very important to understand that greens are very high in the polyunsaturated fatty acids, and that disrupts processes in the body, one of the processes it disrupts is how you actually use the sugar in the body.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it inhibits the fiber production and metabolism of the cell, so therefore it's not a good source of energy for the body whatsoever.
Okay. So let's sum this thing up.
Let me say one more thing.
Go ahead.
Throughout history, and this goes particularly to the people that are actually following, like the paleo diet, and they are very against eating fruits and anything that contains a lot of sugar. It's quite the opposite, my friends. Actually, throughout the evolution of the human being, we could only be able to notice if one food was safe for us to eat or not to eat according to its sweetness. There is nothing pretty much on nature created by itself that when it's sweet is actually poisonous to the body, which we can say many different things about.
Unless it's aspartame.
But it's not great in nature. Come on. So, which it could be the opposite when we talk about, grasses and greens that could be very bitter and very sour. Some of them, they can have a nasty effect on the body. So keep that in mind, that throughout evolution, we actually grew up eating whatever was the most easy access, which is fruit. I mean, it doesn't get any easier. All you have to do sometimes is bend over and pick it up, or just reach over and grab it, as opposed to having to dig for, underground vegetables that oftentimes we couldn't see, or that were not available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then just remember, kids always pick sweet stuff, always. And there's a reason for it, because they're not really consciously thinking about it. And they have pre-installed capacity to understand that if it's sweet, chances are it's good.
Absolutely, I think there's an inherent ability to actually separate, when something is sweet, it's actually good for them to produce energy.
Yeah, the ability to like sour and bitter things comes later in the life, and it's very preferential.
It's an acquired taste.
But the sweetness always stays.
Yeah, there's always going to be some weird kid that, that's 3 years old and likes to drink espresso, but you don't know why he likes to do it, because he sees his father do it, or his uncle that drinks espresso, or he's just a strange kid, period. Let's leave it at that. Yeah, I know a couple of those strange ones.
Gotcha. All right.
So now let's make a list of the carbohydrates or the sugar containing products that we think that are actually good for you, mm-hmm. and the ones that we think that are not so good for you.
So basically, if you eat white table sugar, which is sucrose, a combination of fructose and glucose, you can definitely use it for your advantage. You just want to make sure that you don't overuse it also.
That's right.
Because ultimately it can create a detrimental effect on
and that would be having to do with the individual themselves of how much energy they do need, in fact.
And if you have questions of how to do it, that's when you get somebody to coach you or how to use it. So this is not really a forum to teach you exactly how to do things.
Yep.
We're just going to talk about what you can use or what you cannot use.
Right.
Now, second source, best source will be just fruits.
That's right.
Specifically, fruits that are in season, and we come in the summer. You guys are going to have a lot of peaches, nectarines, plums, all cherries, all a good source of fructose.
My favorite one happens to be oranges, because they're available pretty much all year round. They're very easy to squeeze and make fruit juice out of them, and it's actually very good for you.
All right. So another good source is a watermelon. The things that you kind of can watch out for, it's the rest of the melons. They might be high in mold. Things like blueberries, raspberries do have seeds inside. So for some people, because seeds, if you can refer to our episodes about seeds and nuts, it might have an ability to create some kind of digestive issues, so you would want to watch out for them, even though they are high in antioxidant and they are fruit, so they're generally good for you.
Yeah, that will also include grapes and kiwis, strawberries, raspberries, like you mentioned, or blueberries.
Yeah.
But also don't forget, as a tropical fruit, which is tend to be very high in sugar and quite good for you, you have to be very careful with mangoes, because mangoes, they belong to the family of the poison oak, and a lot of people react very nasty to them. So you have to be careful with those.
Now with the vegetables, any underground vegetables, for example, potatoes, yams, generally a good source of because of sugar. Especially, it's going to be, first of all, you want to remember, it's going to be converted into glucose because it's starch. So you don't want to eat it without fat and protein.
Very important.
So you don't want to put a butter on it and have some sort of protein with it. Yeah. So that's very important to understand. Now the reason why they are better, because they're not loaded with the polyunsaturated fatty acids.
That's correct.
And that's basically what creates a lot of trouble in the human body. So underground vegetables, be very careful with the greens, things like broccoli, cauliflower. Cauliflower is not green, so still it's
the cruciferous, the goitrogens, they tend to inhibit the function of the thyroid by their nature. If you're gonna consume it, they have to be cooked thoroughly so you can break down some of those phytates on them and make them available to your body.
Okay, and if you eat things like tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchinis, they tend to be quite fine for yourself.
Yeah, they're low in polyunsaturated fatty acids, and they actually they will be a good source of carbohydrates.
Now, if you ever need to consume grains, of course, just like in the Weston A. Price Foundation, they're talking about fermentation and sourdough bread. That if you consume anything, you would want to process it. If you ever have to consume legumes, which you don't recommend, also you do want to soak them.
That's right.
Anything else you want to say?
With lacto-fermented or fermented, vegetables, you have to be careful with the lactic acid in there, because that's something that the body produces.
We'll probably do an episode on that.
So we might have to touch bases on a separate episode for that.
Yeah. Anything else?
I think that pretty much sums it up. Sugar is definitely your friend. It depends how you approach it.
And it's definitely not your friend if you abuse it. Thank you very much for watching. Remember, your future looks better already. Until the next time.